The morning sun poured its golden light through the large windows of the mansion, casting a warm glow across the polished floors. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the cleaning machines and the faint footsteps of the staff going about their work. Among them was Aisha, a young black woman who had been working in the mansion for several years. She moved gracefully from room to room, dusting, polishing, and tidying with a careful attention to detail. To anyone watching, she seemed almost invisible, a background figure who kept the house running smoothly without seeking attention. Aisha had grown used to the quiet life of a servant. Her hands bore the marks of hard work, her nails always short from scrubbing and cleaning, and her uniform was plain but neat. Despite the modesty of her position, she carried herself with dignity. There was a quiet strength in her, an inner calm that no amount of teasing or judgment could shake. She knew her worth, even if the people around her did not. On this particular morning, Aisha moved toward the living room, where an old, slightly dusty piano sat in the corner. The piano had been there for years, unused, with its keys covered in a thin layer of dust. The mansion's children had recently discovered it and had begun to play with the idea of asking someone to entertain them. They had grown bored of their usual games, and in their youthful mischief, they decided to call on Aisha. Aisha, called the eldest child, a boy named Henry, with a mischievous grin. "Come here. We want you to play for us." Aisha paused for a moment, holding a duster in her hand. She had expected this kind of request before, often as a joke, but she never minded helping when asked politely. "Yes, Henry," she replied softly, her voice calm and gentle. She stepped into the living room, her eyes cast down, careful not to draw too much attention to herself. The children giggled among themselves. They were used to teasing her, though they rarely imagined it could be taken in any serious way. "Play something funny," Henry exclaimed, pointing at the piano with a playful smirk. "We want to see what a cleaning lady can do." Aisha felt a familiar pang in her chest. She had heard jokes like this before, people underestimating her because of the color of her skin, her job, or her quiet nature. But she had learned to respond with patience rather than anger. She nodded politely. "All right," she said softly, moving toward the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a brief moment, as if remembering a memory she had held close for years. The children leaned forward eagerly, expecting awkward sounds or clumsy notes. They whispered to each other, stifling giggles, certain that this would be nothing more than a moment of harmless amusement. Even some of the adults in the room watched quietly, curious but unconcerned, assuming it would be just another small joke. Aisha took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. She began with a simple scale, slowly and deliberately. The notes were clear, precise, and surprisingly confident. The children exchanged puzzled glances, a flicker of doubt crossing their faces. This was not the clumsy fumbling they had expected. Aisha's fingers moved with a smooth, practiced ease that spoke of years of secret practice, of hidden talent nurtured quietly away from prying eyes. As she played, the melody began to grow richer. What started as a simple tune quickly became more complex, her hands moving gracefully across the keyboard. The notes danced and flowed, filling the room with sound that was both soothing and powerful. The children's laughter faded into silence, their mouths slightly open in astonishment. Even the adults, who had only intended to watch a small joke unfold, paused in their movements, unable to look away from the music. Aisha kept her eyes lowered, as she always did. She did not play for praise or attention, the music was its own reward. Each note was a story, a fragment of her life expressed through sound. She had learned to play in secret, teaching herself from old books and by listening to recordings she had borrowed from a neighbor as a child. She had never had formal lessons, never had anyone to recognize her talent, but she had practiced tirelessly, driven by a love for music that no one could take from her. The room was transformed. The once dusty and forgotten piano became the centerpiece of a magical moment. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed to dance along with the melody, casting patterns of light on the walls and floor. The children leaned closer, captivated, forgetting entirely the teasing they had intended. Their eyes widened as the realization sank in: Aisha was not merely competent, she was extraordinary. Henry, who had been the first to mock her, felt a flush of shame rise in his cheeks. He had expected giggles and clumsy mistakes, not this elegant, precise, breathtaking performance. His younger sister, Lila, covered her mouth with her hands, unable to hide her amazement. Even the adults felt a mixture of surprise and admiration, exchanging glances as they quietly acknowledged that they had misjudged her completely. Aisha continued to play, unaware of the reactions around her. She let the music guide her, allowing each note to flow naturally, expressing feelings she had never found words for. There was pride in her performance, but not arrogance. She did not seek to humiliate the children who had mocked her. Instead, she offered them a glimpse of her world, a world shaped by talent, determination, and quiet perseverance. As the last notes faded into silence, Aisha lifted her hands from the keys and looked up briefly. The room was still, filled with a sense of wonder and respect. The children, who had moments ago been ready to mock her, now looked at her with wide eyes, unsure of what to say. Henry's mischievous grin had vanished, replaced by a tentative smile of apology. I didn't know you could play like that," he said softly. Aisha smiled gently, not with anger, but with understanding. "Music is for everyone," she replied simply. "I just like to play." For the first time, the children saw her not as a cleaning girl, but as a person with a remarkable gift, someone who had hidden a world of talent behind a quiet, modest exterior. The adults nodded in quiet agreement, their expressions a mix of respect and humility. They realized that their assumptions had been wrong, that they had underestimated someone based on her appearance and role in the household. That morning marked a turning point. Aisha returned to her cleaning with a quiet satisfaction, but the memory of the moment lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. They had come to the living room expecting laughter at her expense, but they left with a lesson in humility, respect, and the hidden potential that exists in everyone. Aisha's secret had been revealed, not through boasting or demand, but through the power of her talent. She had shown that even in the face of mockery, grace and skill could command admiration. The children would remember this day for the rest of their lives, not as a moment of ridicule, but as the day they realized that genius can be found in the most unexpected places. From that day forward, Aisha's presence in the mansion began to change. People spoke to her with greater respect, watched her with genuine interest, and slowly, the teasing stopped. She had not asked for recognition, but she had earned it through her quiet strength, her dedication, and her extraordinary talent. The piano, once ignored and forgotten, became a symbol of Aisha's resilience and brilliance. It stood in the corner of the room, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that talent and determination can shine, even in the most unlikely circumstances. As she went about her work, dusting the shelves and polishing the floors, Aisha's mind wandered back to the music she had played, to the notes that had filled the room and transformed the air. She smiled softly, knowing that this was only the beginning, that one day her talent would reach far beyond the walls of the mansion. But for now, she was content, proud, and quietly triumphant, having turned a moment of mockery into a moment of awe. The day after Aisha had first played the piano for the children, the atmosphere in the mansion was noticeably different. The memory of her performance lingered in every room, whispered in quiet conversations between the staff and repeated with amazement by the children. The piano, once a forgotten piece of furniture, had become the center of attention. Henry and Lila could not stop talking about it, replaying the notes in their minds and imagining the way Aisha's fingers had danced across the keys. They were filled with both awe and a touch of shame for the way they had treated her before. Aisha went about her morning duties as usual, sweeping the hallways and polishing the wooden floors, but she noticed that the staff now looked at her differently. Some gave her small smiles, nods of acknowledgement, or whispered compliments as she passed. She appreciated their recognition, though she never allowed it to distract her from her work. Her pride was quiet, the kind that comes from knowing your own worth rather than seeking approval from others. Later that day, the children approached her again, but this time there was a noticeable change in their demeanor. They were hesitant, almost nervous, as if unsure how to address someone they had just learned to respect. "Aisha," Lila said softly, could you play something for us again?" Aisha looked up, her dark eyes calm and warm. She smiled gently. "Of course," she replied, moving gracefully toward the piano. She dusted the keys lightly before sitting down on the bench, as though preparing herself for a performance she had done 1,000 times before. But inside, she felt a mixture of calm focus and quiet anticipation, knowing that music had the power to change not only the atmosphere in the room but the hearts of those who listened. The children settled into chairs, whispering quietly among themselves. They were no longer mocking, but their curiosity was palpable. What could Aisha do this time? Could she truly play more than she had shown yesterday? Their eyes followed every movement, trying to anticipate the sounds that would soon fill the room. Aisha took a deep breath and let her hands fall lightly on the keys. She began with a soft, gentle melody, the notes flowing smoothly and perfectly in harmony. It was a classical piece, full of emotion and subtle beauty, something that seemed far beyond the skill of someone without formal training. As she played, her fingers moved with incredible precision, her touch delicate yet confident, producing music that was both moving and inspiring. The children and the adults in the room were silent, captivated. Henry's earlier mischief was replaced by genuine admiration. He could not believe the depth of skill in someone he had so recently mocked. Lila leaned forward, mesmerized by the beauty of the music, her eyes wide with wonder. Even the housekeeper and other staff members, who had watched quietly from the doorway, were struck by the clarity and emotion in Aisha's performance. As she continued, Aisha began to improvise, adding her own touches to the music. She transformed the simple melody into a complex arrangement, weaving harmonies that seemed almost magical. Her hands moved so quickly and effortlessly that it seemed as if the piano itself was singing under her touch. The room was filled with sound that was at once powerful and tender, commanding attention without demanding it. The children, who had come expecting simple entertainment, were now completely entranced. They leaned forward, holding their breath, afraid to disturb the spell of the music. Henry whispered to his sister, I didn't know anyone could play like this." Lila nodded, unable to speak, her eyes fixed on Aisha as if she were witnessing something sacred. For the first time, the adults in the room began to take notice in a more serious way. The head of the household, Mr. Thompson, had been reading the newspaper in the corner, barely paying attention to the children's antics. But now he set the paper down, his eyes widening as he listened to the intricate melodies filling the room. He had never expected the quiet cleaning girl to possess such talent. A sense of respect replaced the casual indifference he had felt toward her before. Aisha's performance lasted for several minutes, each note carefully chosen and expressed with feeling. When she finished, there was a brief moment of stunned silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if afraid to break the magic that had just taken place. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the space. Henry clapped his hands first, followed by Lila, and finally the adults joined in, their clapping filled with genuine admiration. Aisha stood and nodded politely, her smile quiet and humble. "Thank you," she said softly. She had not played for praise or recognition, but she could not help but feel a small warmth in her heart from the acknowledgement. For the first time, she sensed that her talent was being seen and appreciated, not as a curiosity, but as something valuable and real. After the applause died down, Mr. Thompson approached her, his expression a mixture of surprise and admiration. Aisha, he said carefully, I had no idea you could play like that. That was remarkable. Aisha's smile did not falter. Thank you, sir, she replied politely, keeping her usual calm and modest demeanor. She was not seeking approval, but it was encouraging to see that even those who had underestimated her were beginning to recognize her skill. Over the next few days, Aisha's reputation in the mansion began to change. The children, once teasing and mocking, now watched her with a new kind of respect. They asked her to play for them more often, not as a joke, but because they genuinely enjoyed her music. She taught them simple melodies, patiently guiding their small hands over the keys, and they quickly discovered that learning from her was both fun and inspiring. The staff, too, began to treat her differently. Where they had once seen her only as a cleaning girl, they now saw someone with talent, intelligence, and determination. They began to speak to her with more respect, consulting her opinions on matters they had previously ignored. Aisha remained humble, never flaunting her skill, but she could feel a quiet shift in the way people interacted with her. One afternoon, as she was polishing the grand chandelier in the dining room, Henry approached her. Aisha, he said quietly, can you teach me more? I want to play like you. Aisha looked down at him, her smile gentle. Of course, Henry, she said. I will show you, step by step. Music is for everyone who wants to learn. As she began teaching him, she realized that her music had become more than just a personal passion. It was a bridge, connecting her to the people around her in a way that words could not. Through her talent, she was earning respect, forming bonds, and slowly changing the perceptions of those who had once dismissed her. Even in her private moments, Aisha felt a sense of quiet triumph. She had hidden her talent for so long, not because she was ashamed, but because no one had ever taken her seriously. Now, she was finally being seen not just as a cleaning girl, but as a person with gifts that could inspire and move others. Her heart swelled with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her perseverance, dedication, and love for music had not gone unnoticed. The piano itself seemed to respond to her, the keys polished and shining, waiting for her to return and create more music. Aisha's relationship with it had grown deeper, almost personal, as if it recognized her as its rightful player. Each note she played carried a piece of her soul, and each melody left a lasting impression on those who listened. By the end of the week, the entire household had witnessed Aisha's talent. Conversations among the adults often included references to her skill, and the children could not stop talking about the music she played. What had started as a moment of mockery had transformed into a profound appreciation for someone who had long been underestimated. Aisha continued her work with the same diligence and care, but there was a new lightness in her step. The mansion, once a place where she felt invisible, was now a space where her talent and presence were acknowledged. She remained humble, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence, knowing that she had earned the respect of those around her. The transformation in the household was subtle but noticeable. The children treated her with newfound kindness, the staff spoke to her with respect, and even the head of the household began to see her in a different light. Aisha's music had opened their eyes to the danger of assumptions, showing that talent, grace, and intelligence could be found in the most unexpected places. In the evenings, when the house was quiet and the sun dipped below the horizon, Aisha would sit at the piano alone. She played for herself, for the love of the music, and for the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her gift had finally been recognized. Each note was a reminder that perseverance, patience, and humility could turn even the smallest opportunities into moments of greatness. Aisha's story in the mansion was just beginning. Her talent had begun to shine, and those around her were starting to understand that genius often hides in places where it is least expected. The piano, once ignored and forgotten, had become a symbol of her hidden brilliance and the respect she had quietly earned. After several weeks of playing and teaching in the mansion, Aisha's music had begun to weave its way into the lives of everyone there. The children had improved significantly, learning not just the basics but developing a love for the piano that seemed to match her own. Henry, once a mischievous and impatient boy, now spent hours practicing melodies with Aisha, his small fingers attempting to copy the elegance and precision of her movements. Lila, equally fascinated, had started composing little tunes on her own, often running to Aisha with ideas she wanted to try. Aisha encouraged them gently, correcting their mistakes without scolding, showing them the joy of learning rather than the fear of failure. She understood that patience was just as important as skill, and she made each lesson a small adventure. The children began to look forward to these sessions, eagerly anticipating the moments when they could sit beside her at the piano and explore music together. The staff, too, had grown fond of Aisha's presence. They often paused to listen when she played, impressed not just by her skill but by the emotion she poured into each note. The housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds, who had been the most skeptical when Aisha first arrived, now admitted quietly to herself that she had underestimated the girl. "She has something special," she whispered to a fellow maid one morning, as Aisha's music floated through the corridors. "Something you can't teach in any school." Even the children's father, Mr. Thompson, had begun to take notice more seriously. He was a busy man, often preoccupied with work and responsibilities, yet he found himself lingering near the music room more frequently. The sound of Aisha's piano had a calming effect, reminding him of his own childhood and the long-forgotten lessons his mother had tried to teach him. He couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and humility. Someone he had overlooked for months had a talent that left him speechless. One afternoon, a special guest arrived at the mansion. Mr. Thompson's old friend, Mr. Langley, was visiting from another city. He was a well-known music professor and patron of young talents. As soon as he entered, Aisha's music was playing softly in the background. The professor paused, listening carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to determine the source. "Who is playing this?" he asked, genuinely curious. The housekeeper hesitated, glancing toward Aisha, who was quietly arranging flowers in a corner. That's Aisha, sir," she said, a note of pride in her voice. "She's one of the cleaning staff, but she plays the piano." The professor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Aisha? You mean the cleaning girl?" he asked, not quite believing it. "I must hear this for myself." Aisha, unaware of the attention she had attracted, smiled politely and walked toward the piano. She began to play, her fingers moving with the same grace and confidence she always displayed. The professor's eyes widened as he listened to the flawless execution and the deep emotion of her music. Each note told a story, each melody conveyed a feeling that went beyond words. He had never heard anyone play with such skill and sensitivity. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then, the professor clapped his hands slowly, his expression a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "This is extraordinary," he said. "Truly remarkable. I have never encountered someone with such natural talent and understanding of music." Aisha nodded politely, her calm demeanor unchanged. "Thank you, sir," she replied softly. She did not play for recognition or praise, but it was impossible to ignore the genuine astonishment in the professor's voice. Mr. Langley turned to Mr. Thompson, his tone serious but excited. "You have a gem here, Thompson," he said. "She is not just a talented musician, she is a genius. With the right guidance, she could achieve incredible things." The revelation sent a ripple through the household. The children's eyes widened in admiration, the staff whispered excitedly, and even Mr. Thompson felt a pang of guilt for ever doubting Aisha's potential. It was clear that her talent could no longer be confined to the walls of the mansion. She deserved a chance to shine on a larger stage. Over the next few days, the professor and Mr. Thompson discussed ways to nurture Aisha's talent. They spoke of music schools, scholarships, and concerts where she could perform for audiences who would truly appreciate her skill. Aisha listened quietly, absorbing the information with modesty. She had never dreamed of being recognized beyond the mansion, and the idea of performing for strangers made her slightly nervous. But she trusted those who believed in her, and she was willing to try. Meanwhile, the children continued to learn from her. Henry and Lila were now practicing pieces that required precision and patience, skills they had once found frustrating. Aisha encouraged them to see mistakes as opportunities to grow, teaching them that perseverance was just as important as talent. Her lessons extended beyond music. She taught them kindness, patience, and the importance of treating others with respect, lessons they would carry with them far beyond the piano bench. One morning, as Aisha played a soft, haunting melody, Mr. Thompson observed quietly from the doorway. He realized that her influence on the household was profound. She had changed the way the children behaved, inspired the staff to be more attentive and respectful, and even touched him in ways he hadn't expected. Her music had become more than sound, it was a force that brought people together, softened hearts, and created understanding where there had once been judgment. The house itself seemed to respond to her presence. The once quiet and ordinary rooms now felt alive when she played. Sunlight seemed to linger longer in the music room, the walls absorbed the melodies and reflected them with warmth, and even the grand piano seemed to shine more brightly under her touch. Aisha's connection to the instrument was profound, as if it recognized her as its true master. Word of Aisha's talent began to spread beyond the mansion. One afternoon, a neighbor overheard her playing while walking past the window. The woman, an accomplished pianist herself, was so impressed that she stopped immediately, listening quietly until the music ended. She returned the next day with an invitation for Aisha to play at a local recital. At first, Aisha hesitated. She had spent her life focused on work and family responsibilities, never imagining that she would perform publicly. But Mr. Langley encouraged her, explaining that sharing her talent could inspire others and open doors she had never dreamed possible. "You have a gift," he said. "It is meant to be shared." With careful consideration, Aisha agreed. She began to prepare, selecting pieces that would best showcase her skill and emotion. She practiced tirelessly, refining every note and ensuring that each performance would carry the depth of feeling she always infused into her music. Even when the children interrupted her lessons with questions or mistakes, she remained patient, balancing her own preparation with her dedication to teaching them. The day of the recital arrived, and Aisha felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never performed before an audience outside the mansion, and the thought of many eyes watching her was intimidating. But as she stepped onto the stage and placed her hands on the keys, all fear melted away. She played as she always did, focused, graceful, and full of passion. The audience was captivated. Each note seemed to resonate deeply, drawing everyone into the story of the music. By the time she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by enthusiastic applause. Aisha had not only proven her skill but also touched the hearts of everyone in the room. After the recital, she was approached by several music teachers and patrons, all eager to offer her guidance, scholarships, and opportunities to perform. For the first time in her life, Aisha realized that her talent had the power to change her destiny, to open doors that had once seemed impossible. Returning to the mansion that evening, she was greeted by the children and staff, all eager to hear about her experience. Henry and Lila listened wide-eyed as she described the audience, the applause, and the encouragement she had received. Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper, hugged her warmly, saying, "You were meant for greatness, Aisha. We always knew it." Aisha smiled quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known. Her life, once limited to cleaning and small routines, had transformed. Music had not only allowed her to express herself but had also changed the way others saw her. She had moved from being underestimated to being celebrated, from being overlooked to being recognized for her true worth. As the night settled in, Aisha sat at the piano once more, playing a soft, reflective tune for herself. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the early days of mockery, the patience she had practiced, and the support of those who had believed in her. Each note was a reminder that talent, combined with perseverance and humility, could overcome prejudice and open new paths. She knew that this was only the beginning. Opportunities awaited beyond the mansion, beyond the city, beyond anything she had imagined. And yet, no matter where her talent took her, she remained grounded, grateful for the people who had encouraged her and the lessons she had learned along the way. After her first recital, Aisha's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. Invitations to perform at local events and music schools started arriving. Each offer filled her with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had grown used to the quiet life at the mansion, where her days were predictable, and her responsibilities were clear. Now, she faced a world full of unknowns, full of opportunities that demanded courage and determination. Mr. Langley and Mr. Thompson worked closely to ensure she had the support she needed. They accompanied her to meetings, helped her prepare for performances, and even introduced her to other musicians who could guide her further. Aisha was grateful but remained humble. She never allowed herself to forget her roots or the people who had supported her from the beginning. She still cleaned the mansion, still taught Henry and Lila, and still cared for the small routines that had shaped her life. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a prestigious music competition in the city. It was a significant opportunity. The event was known for discovering young talents and helping them launch professional careers. Aisha hesitated at first. The thought of competing against trained musicians from renowned schools made her anxious. Could she really compete with them? Was her talent enough? But Mr. Langley encouraged her with gentle words. "Aisha," he said, "talent like yours is rare. Don't let fear hold you back. You've worked hard, and your music touches people's hearts. That is what matters most. Trust yourself." With renewed determination, Aisha accepted the challenge. She practiced every day, carefully choosing pieces that showcased not only her technical skill but also her ability to express emotion. She experimented with different styles, combining classical techniques with her own interpretations, creating melodies that were uniquely hers. The mansion became her sanctuary once again. She spent hours at the piano, sometimes late into the night, perfecting each note. Henry and Lila would occasionally sneak into the music room, quietly watching her play. They were amazed by her dedication and inspired by her courage. Even the staff watched her with admiration, understanding that something extraordinary was unfolding before their eyes. Finally, the day of the competition arrived. Aisha felt a mix of excitement and fear as she entered the grand hall filled with musicians, judges, and an audience eager to hear the performances. The hall was enormous, and the lights shone brightly on the stage. For a moment, she felt small and uncertain, but then she took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was there. She was not performing for recognition or awards, she was performing because music was her voice, her way of sharing her soul. When it was her turn, Aisha walked onto the stage with grace. She sat at the grand piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The room fell silent, everyone waiting to hear the first note. As she began to play, all her fear disappeared. The music flowed naturally, each note resonating with power, emotion, and beauty. The audience was captivated. Some held their breath, completely absorbed in the melodies, while others closed their eyes, allowing themselves to be carried away by the story her music told. Aisha played with the same passion she had always felt, but now, it was amplified by the presence of an audience that had never heard her before. Her fingers moved swiftly and precisely, yet each note carried warmth and depth. The judges exchanged impressed glances, whispering quietly to one another. It was clear that her talent was not just remarkable, it was extraordinary. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an eruption of applause. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, and even wiping tears from their eyes. Aisha felt a wave of emotion herself. She had done it. She had shared her music with the world and touched the hearts of everyone present. The judges approached her afterward, offering words of praise and admiration. One of them, a renowned pianist, shook her hand and said, "Young lady, your talent is beyond anything I have seen. You have the potential to become a world-class musician. Keep believing in yourself." Aisha smiled, feeling both proud and humbled. She had worked hard, and now the world was beginning to recognize her. But despite the applause and the praise, she remained the same humble girl who had once swept floors and quietly played the piano in the mansion. She knew that true success was not measured by awards or recognition but by the joy and inspiration her music could bring to others. Returning home to the mansion after the competition, Aisha was greeted with excitement and joy. Henry and Lila ran to her, asking every detail about the audience, the judges, and the applause. The staff congratulated her warmly, and even Mr. Thompson seemed to glow with pride. He realized that he had witnessed something truly remarkable. A young girl who had been underestimated and overlooked had now begun to shine in a way that inspired everyone around her. But Aisha's journey was far from over. She continued to perform, each time growing more confident and skilled. She began to compose her own music, creating pieces that told stories of hope, perseverance, and resilience. Her compositions reflected her life experiences, the struggles she had faced, and the joy she had discovered in sharing her talent. People who heard her music felt moved, as if they were hearing a voice that spoke directly to their hearts. Aisha also began to mentor other young musicians, especially those who, like her, came from humble beginnings. She understood the importance of encouragement, guidance, and opportunity. She wanted to give back, to help others find their own voice through music. Her lessons were patient and kind, always focusing on nurturing talent and building confidence. As her reputation grew, so did the recognition of her unique story. Newspapers and magazines featured articles about the girl who had once been mocked for her humble role but had emerged as a musical genius. People were inspired by her journey, seeing in her a symbol of perseverance, talent, and the power of believing in oneself. Despite the growing attention, Aisha remained grounded. She never let fame change who she was. She continued to live simply, cherishing the small moments in life, the laughter of the children she taught, the quiet beauty of playing the piano, and the sense of fulfillment that came from sharing her music with the world. She knew that true happiness came not from recognition, but from passion, purpose, and the ability to inspire others. One afternoon, as she practiced a new composition, Mr. Langley approached her with a serious expression. "Aisha," he said, "I have been thinking about something. You have an incredible gift, and the world deserves to hear it on the biggest stages. There is an opportunity to perform in a concert hall in the capital city, in front of influential musicians and critics. It could open doors to a career you have never dreamed of." Aisha paused, considering the offer carefully. The thought of performing in such a prestigious venue was both thrilling and intimidating. But she remembered the encouragement she had received from those who believed in her, the countless hours of practice, and the joy that music had brought her throughout her life. She nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I will do it," she said softly. "I want to share my music with as many people as possible." The preparations for the Capitol concert were intense. Aisha practiced tirelessly, refining every piece, perfecting each note, and ensuring that her performance would be flawless. She faced challenges along the way, moments of self-doubt, and physical fatigue, but her passion for music kept her moving forward. She knew that this was more than a performance, it was a chance to show the world the power of talent, dedication, and resilience. When the day of the concert arrived, Aisha stood backstage, listening to the murmurs of the audience and the applause for the previous performers. Her heart raced, but she focused on the music, on the story she wanted to tell through every note. As she stepped onto the grand stage, the lights shining down on her, she felt a calm resolve. This was her moment, the culmination of years of effort, perseverance, and belief in herself. As she began to play, the audience was captivated. Her music flowed like a river, powerful yet gentle, technical yet deeply emotional. Each piece she performed carried a piece of her soul, and the audience could feel it. The hall was filled with awe, admiration, and an almost tangible sense of connection. Aisha's talent was undeniable, and her performance left everyone in silent wonder. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Standing ovations, cheers, and expressions of admiration greeted her. Aisha felt a mixture of joy, humility, and gratitude. She had achieved something extraordinary, but she remained the same humble, hard-working girl who had always found solace in the simple joy of playing the piano. As the audience continued to applaud, Aisha realized that this was only the beginning. Her music had the power to inspire, to bring people together, and to touch hearts in ways words could not. She had overcome obstacles, prejudice, and self-doubt, and she had done it with grace, humility, and unwavering dedication. The world had finally recognized her genius, and she was ready to embrace the journey ahead. The day of Aisha's biggest performance finally arrived. She had been invited to play at a world-renowned music hall in the capital city, a venue where only the finest musicians were ever given a chance. It was a dream that once seemed impossible, especially for a girl who had grown up cleaning floors and quietly practicing on a piano in a dusty mansion. Now, the seats in the grand hall would be filled with critics, professional musicians, and music lovers from all over the country. Aisha felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she prepared backstage. Her hands trembled slightly as she warmed up on a smaller piano near the side of the stage. She thought about how far she had come, the days she spent practicing in secret, the times she was underestimated, and the moments when she almost gave up. But those memories didn't bring sadness. Instead, they brought a quiet strength and determination. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had shaped her into the musician she had become. Mr. Langley and Mr. Thompson stood nearby, offering encouragement. "Remember, Aisha," Mr. Langley said softly, "you have touched so many hearts with your music. Today is just another chance to share your gift. Trust yourself, and let your music speak." Aisha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment but also a sense of calm. She walked onto the stage, the spotlight shining down, illuminating the grand piano before her. The audience hushed instantly, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. As she sat down and placed her fingers on the keys, she felt a familiar warmth, a connection between herself, the piano, and the music that had always been her companion. The first note echoed through the hall, pure and strong. Aisha let herself become one with the piano, letting her fingers dance across the keys with both precision and emotion. Each piece she played told a story of struggle and hope, of humility and courage, of dreams that refused to fade even in the darkest moments. The audience listened, completely captivated. Some held their breath, some had tears in their eyes, and others simply leaned forward, unable to look away. As the performance continued, Aisha introduced her own compositions, pieces that she had written over months of careful thought and practice. These were deeply personal works, inspired by her life experiences, her dreams, and her love for music. Every note seemed to carry a message, that talent could rise from anywhere, that hard work could overcome obstacles, and that even the smallest voices could make the world listen. The critics, known for their tough standards, were visibly impressed. They whispered among themselves, nodding in agreement at her skill and artistry. Her music was not just technically perfect, it was alive, full of emotion and story. It moved people in ways they could not have anticipated. Even the most skeptical audience members found themselves completely absorbed, carried away by the beauty of her performance. When she finished the last piece, there was a moment of stunned silence. The audience seemed unable to believe what they had just witnessed. And then, as if the hall had been waiting for this single moment, thunderous applause erupted. People jumped to their feet, cheering, clapping, and shouting her name. Flowers were thrown onto the stage, and her friends and mentors ran to embrace her. Aisha felt tears welling in her eyes, not from fear or nervousness, but from the overwhelming joy of knowing that she had shared her heart with the world. After the concert, interviews and offers began to pour in. Music schools wanted her to study with their top teachers, concert halls invited her to perform, and renowned orchestras asked her to join their ensembles. Aisha listened carefully to each offer, considering her next steps with thoughtfulness and care. She knew that this was more than just fame or recognition, it was a responsibility to continue creating music that inspired and uplifted people. Yet, despite the excitement and opportunities, Aisha remained grounded. She returned to the mansion, greeted warmly by Henry, Lila, and the staff who had supported her from the very beginning. She continued to teach, to care for the children, and to help in the small ways she always had. Fame had not changed her. She had grown, but she had never forgotten where she came from or the people who had believed in her when no one else did. One afternoon, while practicing a new piece, Aisha received a letter from an international music foundation. They offered her a scholarship to study abroad, to work with some of the greatest pianists in the world. It was an opportunity that many musicians could only dream of. She hesitated for a moment, thinking about leaving the mansion, leaving her home, and stepping into a completely new world. But she also knew that this was a chance to grow, to learn, and to share her music with an even larger audience. With a deep breath and a heart full of courage, she accepted. In the months that followed, Aisha traveled to the International Music School. She was surrounded by talented students from around the globe, some of whom had trained their entire lives in music conservatories. At first, she felt intimidated, remembering the years when she had been doubted and underestimated. But she quickly realized that her unique background and experiences gave her a perspective and depth that set her apart. She worked tirelessly, learning new techniques, experimenting with different styles, and collaborating with other musicians. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. Teachers and mentors praised her creativity, her passion, and her unwavering commitment to her craft. Aisha's performances in school recitals drew attention, and soon she was invited to perform in international competitions and festivals. Each time she played, she shared not just her technical skill, but her story, her journey, and the emotions that had shaped her. Audiences around the world were moved by her music, inspired by her talent, and motivated by her courage. Back home, her story continued to inspire people. Newspapers and television programs told of the girl who had once been mocked for her humble work but had risen to international fame through talent, hard work, and determination. Young musicians, especially those from underprivileged backgrounds, looked to her as a role model. She received letters from children and teens, sharing their own dreams and struggles, and asking for advice. Aisha always replied with kindness, encouraging them to keep practicing, to believe in themselves, and to never give up, no matter how difficult life might seem. Years passed, and Aisha's career flourished. She performed in the most prestigious concert halls, recorded albums that became widely celebrated, and composed music that touched hearts across the world. Yet, she never forgot the mansion where she had begun, the piano that had been her companion, and the people who had first believed in her. She returned often, giving private concerts, teaching, and mentoring the next generation of musicians. Her fame had never made her forget the joy of simply playing, simply creating, and simply sharing her heart through music. Aisha's life became a symbol of hope and perseverance. She had overcome prejudice, doubt, and countless obstacles, proving that talent and determination could break through any barrier. But more importantly, she had remained true to herself, humble, kind, and passionate. Her music was not just an expression of skill, it was a reflection of her soul, a bridge that connected people, and a reminder that dreams, no matter how unlikely, could come true. One quiet evening, after a long day of teaching and practicing, Aisha sat at her piano in the mansion. The sun was setting, casting warm light across the room. She played softly, letting the music flow naturally, not for an audience, not for recognition, but simply for the love of it. Each note was a story, each melody a memory, each chord a piece of her journey. And as she played, she smiled, knowing that she had not only found her voice but had also helped others find theirs. Aisha's journey from a humble cleaning girl to a world-renowned pianist was extraordinary, but what made it truly remarkable was her heart. She had faced the world with courage, embraced her gift with humility, and shared her talent with love. Her story was no longer just her own, it had become an inspiration for countless others, showing that true genius could come from anywhere, and that anyone who believed in themselves could rise above life's challenges to shine in ways the world would never forget. And so, Aisha continued to play, to teach, and to inspire. The girl who had once been mocked for her humble beginnings had become a beacon of hope, a symbol of perseverance, and a living testament to the power of music, passion, and unwavering determination. Every note she played carried a message, that talent is not defined by background, that dreams are worth chasing, and that even in the face of doubt, the human spirit can achieve greatness.